Chris Burkard and Mike Bubolo. Thanks for joining us today.
Thanks for having me.
Chris, I'd like to start with you. We just saw some of what you were doing in that video. Tell me about how you were shooting with a new camera.
Absolutely. So I went to a national park in Alaska that I've always dreamt of going to, Wrangell St. Elias. It's larger than Switzerland and Yellowstone put together. And basically, for me, I focused on really two things. I wanted to focus on the slow motion video aspect by shooting from a plane. Actually, we flew over the Bagley ice field, and we were shooting two Piper Cubs, two small planes flying really fast, handheld in a small area. So that compactness was really crucial for what we were doing. And then I shot in some ice caves right at the base of Wrangell St. Elias. And if you're familiar with ice caves, it goes from being really bright and beautiful to being super dark. So those are really the two activities I focused on. And I really tried to push the limits of that camera. You know, I'm super familiar with the S2. And so this was kind of a real step up. I really wanted to see what it could do and really test its video capabilities.
And what did you think?
I mean, I was blown away. I mean, we spoke about this earlier, but there's something so special about when you're really in these moments where normally you'd need a tripod and you need a really patient subject, and you're like, okay, move slow. You know, I'm shooting, you know, a fifth of a second, but I was in this ice cave totally uninhibited, shooting, you know, ISO 8,000, 10,000, no quality difference, just beautiful grain-free images, allowing my subjects, my guides to move around really seamlessly. It was unreal. I mean, that was truly the significance. And a good camera, a great technology should allow you that freedom. It should afford you that ability to kind of work uninhibited and allow the creative process to just unfold. And so that was, for me, it was free, you know, and that's really why I think I lean towards that camera.
Thanks. And Mike, Chris was just talking about the dynamic range of the new camera and the high ISO capability. The previous generations of the a7S have been well known for their ISO capability. Tell me a little bit about that.
Yeah, I mean, it's pretty hard to dethrone the king of high ISO, but the a7S Mark II was the king of high ISO performance. It was the camera that's always been my camera of choice because of that. So like Chris said, you can shoot anywhere and feel unencumbered. Wherever you want to go, you can always shoot. And this camera takes it to another level. And it's not just about your high ISO performance, but it's about the color reproduction and the detail that happens in those high ISOs. So now, you know, we've dethroned our own people in terms of the king of high ISO. And that on top of having over 15 stops dynamic range makes this camera have possibilities that we just have, that no one's ever had in this type of camera before. And it's pretty impressive and opens up a lot of creative opportunities for a lot of people.
And what is the ISO range on the new camera?
Goes up to 409,600, which sounds crazy, which is the same maximum as it was on the a7S Mark II. But in my personal experience and some of the stuff that I've seen Chris shoot, I mean, it's usable in the 50,000, 100,000 range, and you can still create content at 400 and still be able to share it. It's really does. Like when I say it really changes the way you can create, it really does change the way you can create.
So Chris, what were you shooting at?
That's so significant what you just said, that is it's actually usable at those high ISO ranges. For me specifically, a couple years ago, I made a film about surfing over the Northern Lights, and we were shooting at ISO 30,000 and putting it on a big screen, you know, a huge cinema screen, and we were able to get incredible results. And that blew my mind. That was truly what made this significant. So I just wanted to add there that it's not about how high the range goes, it's about the quality at those high ranges, and you're not losing tons of dynamic range by increasing that ISO. It's incredible.
Yeah, that's a really great point. It's all about the usability, right? You can pack specs into any device, but if it's not performing for you, if you just can't use it well, those specs don't mean a whole lot.
Absolutely.
Mike, I wanted to ask you about the new processor in this camera a little bit. It's got the new Bionz XR processor, how does that figure into the new camera? And tell me about that design.
So even though the a7S Mark III looks almost identical to the Alpha 9 Mark II and Alpha 7R Mark IV, it's completely new from the inside out. Everything on the camera is brand new, including that Bionz XR processing engine. So it's not just a processor, it's actually multiple processors with multiple components, and it's 8 times faster than any processor we put into an Alpha camera before. And it really is the brains of of this camera. It enables us to do a lot of things that we can do. It enables us to have twice the readout speed, 3 times better rolling shutter, process all that information, and 1200 megabits per second inside the camera enables us to do all those things in the camera. And you'll see now with the Alpha 7S Mark III that it's really going to be the foundation and the cornerstone to where we go in the future, not just for our stills cameras, but for also our video cameras, because it is such a beast in terms of how much processing power it has and what it can do.
And that processing power came into play for you, Chris, because you were saying that you were shooting, some pretty extreme video in the aerial footage and doing some slow-mo and stuff like that. Talk to me a little bit more about that shoot.
Yeah, so it's a really complicated scenario when you're in a tight space. I mean, it's all about the use case of the camera. So for me, we're in a plane, we have tiny bit of room, and we can't use something larger. We're really stuck using, the biggest bang for our buck, and that was the S3. And you're putting this camera out the window of the plane, shooting another plane flying at like 60 miles an hour, 100 miles an hour, and that was really crucial, is being able to have that functionality. You're not overheating. You're able to have really intuitive dial controls, switching back and forth. And I think the beauty here was the real kind of question mark, the what if, was how good of quality is this slow motion, right? And I was blown away. It was incredible. It felt like we were shooting off of a gimbal, right, up in the air, shooting this other plane right below us. And that, for me, it's really about testing it in those real world scenarios. I don't want to advocate for a camera that a DP or a director couldn't get behind and say, I know I can nail this shot. And what it does is you realize it opens up a whole new world of what you can do, because you can literally see in the dark. That is the true game changer. And that tagline, it's real, it's raw. And that's what the camera really truly does for you. It opens up a world of possibilities where normally tripods are like a ball and chain you'd have over your back and you'd have to drag around. You don't need that.
Right. Again, it's about that usability, that performance, and being able to really put it to good use when you're out there in the field. And like you said, tripods, we all know we're supposed to use them, and we all hate using them, and we all leave them in the car, right?
we love them, and they have their place. But man, when you can move around with the simplicity of not having it, and knowing that it's like nighttime and you can shoot slow motion because you can bump that ISO up, that's special. Like, people are going to create footage that we've never seen before because of this camera.
Yeah. And you were mentioning just now, when you were in the plane and you were shooting in some of that kind of those demanding conditions, that the camera did not get hot on you, didn't overheat on you.
No, that's one real big factor, right? Is obviously it's kind of like nobody likes to talk about that. Is like, what's the runtime? How hot do these things get? And, obviously we're in Alaska, it's a cold environment, but inside these cockpits, it gets warm, right? And so we really wanted to test it by running it like as far as we could push it. And there was 0 overheating issues, which was really awesome. And I think just the intuitiveness of the controls from a video perspective, obviously, and a stills has evolved a lot.
Mm-hmm. Mike, could you speak a little bit to the heating and how Sony has overcome overheating issues with the A7S III? Absolutely.
So it was, again, like, this camera was really purpose built for this customer, for the professional videographer. We had that customer in mind, and then we built the perfect product for them. So obviously, being able to dissipate heat and heat management was one of our number one priorities. But we didn't want to take shortcuts. We didn't want to compromise. So we have, from the inside out, this entirely new heat management system that incorporates much of the inside of the camera. And we didn't want to have to put in fans, because once you put in fans, then you lose dust and moisture resistance. You create noise, so you can't use onboard microphones. So we created this heat management system that actually works with the materials on the camera and incorporates totally inside the camera to give us over hour-long recordings in 4K 60p all-eye at huge bit rates, or until the battery runs out, and even longer run times when connected to USB power. So the possibilities are really endless. The chances of it overheating are pretty slim. So.
And actually, we got a question here that just got submitted, and a question for you, Chris, to talk a little bit more about the heating, a little clarification. So you were shooting for how long in the plane in those conditions?
Yeah, we were running this camera as long as humanly possible. 20-minute, 30-minute video clips. Obviously, and the key thing here is that when you're obviously in Alaska, again, it's a cold environment, but the sun is beating down in this tiny cockpit, and it gets really warm, actually, like surprisingly warm. It's like a sauna. And so, yeah, we were filming for hours on end up there because, the light's only so good for a certain period of time. So really trying to hone in on just being able to not only, shoot normal footage, but slow motion, which was really our focus for that, which I don't know if you're familiar with, but it really can tax a camera, right? That's kind of the beauty here, is that we were really putting that to the test. Big bank rolls, with the plane shooting straight down, shooting kind of over the pilot's shoulder and whatnot, and zero issues. In fact, I was surprised and slightly concerned that the camera was going to be much larger because of the heating and cooling. I had heard, hey, this thing has incredible cool down capabilities. It's not going to overheat on you. Run times are better, efficiency's better, and I was shocked because it just fit in my hand just like any other of the R4, R3 range.
Mm-hmm. And how long did you have the camera actually, Chris?
I had it for longer than they probably wanted me to, and I tried to keep it after that. But I had it for about 2 weeks, and to be honest, there's this line in the video that's really funny. It's like, I want to go back to every place I've ever shot and shoot it with this, because it's so true. I mean, I'm thinking of the Milky Way, and I'm thinking of Northern Lights. I'm thinking of all these scenarios where, for me, I love the idea of going back and creating a better image, a better result. And that was kind of obviously it was summertime. I couldn't go shoot a lot of these things I wanted to do. So I'm just dreaming up ideas of how I could take this thing and shoot it at ISO 16,000, which is I believe that's its native ISO range or something like that. I mean, it's incredible being able to just utilize this thing as a real tool in your toolkit.
Yeah, you talk about going back to places and sort of just re-exploring them and seeing them with that new eye, and knowing that there's different things that you can do now. That's really a powerful, kind of a message. That's a powerful ability, right? Is to be able to rethink all the places that you've seen one way and think about them a new way.
Also, it should be mentioned, this is something that people won't think about, but the screen, the way it articulates. So the screen folds out, kind of like the new vlogging camera, the Z1, whatever it's called. So that allows for maximum flexibility and creativity. Obviously, if you're a filmmaker, you want to put the camera on the ground, you can look at the screen. If you want to have it above your head, all of a sudden you've got a 3-4, 4 foot extension, right? Because you can reach this thing way up there. Being able to shoot in a confined environment, or in a creative environment where you want to put the lens right next to an ice cave or right outside the window of the plane, that screen articulating is huge. I mean, it sounds silly, but that's an absolute game changer, and something that I requested. A lot of the other Sony Alpha professionals requested. So that was a really big help and support.
Yeah, and that screen, as you mentioned, is also a touch screen. So it's all touch capable or touch controllable. So you have even more versatility. It's not just about being able to get that screen out of the way and be able to see what you're doing. It's about actually being able to control the camera.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
So Mike, can you talk a little bit more about that touch screen and how that's working?
Yeah, so there's an entirely, to Chris's point, having that variable screen is impressive because, like he said, small spaces, you can put it against the windshield of a car on a dashboard and be able to see what the camera's seeing and be able to do these things, or put it on a video rig without having to, and be able to see what the camera's seeing. And most importantly, sometimes when you're in those situations, you can't access the menu and change settings, but now you can customize one of the buttons on the outside of the camera on the top to access the menu, and now the entire menu is touchscreen capable. So you can be able to go through the menu, scroll through that menu, and be able to do everything from the touchscreen. Beyond that, I'm sure we've worked with Chris, we've worked with tons of people. Again, this is a product that we designed specifically for this market, and we've been working with thousands of photographers and videographers over these years, for the last 5 years, to create the best menu system. And now we have a vertically driven menu system that now has your subject on the left, the folders in the middle, and then what's within those folders on the right-hand side. So you can scroll through, you can get through everything, and you can go through all those functions very easily. It's just very intuitive. The whole thing is just very efficient, so to speak.
Yeah, I wanted to just give a little high five to the menu creation. This has always been a pain, a little bit of a struggle for me with some of the older cameras, is the menus. Obviously, it's amazing because there's so much, but it becomes overwhelming really quickly. And this menu was so intuitive. I mean, literally, it's completely redesigned. So it takes a minute to kind of, if you're used to using the R4 or the S2, but the moment you dive in there, you're like, oh my gosh, all the things I need, like video settings, they're all right in front of me. And that was huge, especially in really like crux situations where you need to switch something fast. You're going between shooting modes. You want to shoot in flat light. You want to, this and that. It's right in front of you. And that was a surprising change, actually.
Yeah, and we're going to get a full tour of that menu system in a Q&A in just a bit here with another member from the Sony Pro support team. But Chris, I want to talk to you just a little bit more about that experience of being able to use that menu that way and how that was kind of freeing for you. I find that menus, they can be complicated. A lot of it is just kind of getting used to it. But this menu is more intuitive and has just been laid out in a totally different way and really reimagined.
Exactly. Yeah. So it's kind of funny when we dive in. This is the nerdy side of us coming out because we love this stuff, right? We love the things that save us seconds of time in those situations. That it's immense. It's really important, right? And being able to obviously switch between shooting modes, switch between frame rates, and just be able to obviously dial in a custom menu setting. As Mike mentioned, that was really easy. As were before, custom menus are kind of challenging, but having everything you want right there was great. I found, at least for me, the key thing is also that ability to put the camera like in the front of a windshield and use the touch screen when the screen is facing you. I mean, before it was like, take the camera and basically flip it around and try to dial it in and then push record and set it up, hoping you're getting the shot. This is a game changer. I mean, you can have the camera pointing directly down, pointing directly up from the ground and dial in your menu settings right there. That's an incredible feature that I think shouldn't be understated. As much and as important as the technology is of the low light, the new sensor, this is like a really incredible feature. And it mostly just saves you time and energy. And again, for me, I'm not the tech savvy dude here. I'm all about experience. And when a camera can heighten that creative experience, it's freeing. It takes the shackles off and allows you to focus on, what do I want to create? What do I want to do? I want to get this POV shot of me and the pilot, or an ice cave image where I'm like, bringing the camera right along the wall of the ice cave. That's really special to me.
And talking about the ice caves, tell us a little bit more about that shoot. I'm really intrigued by that. I've never been up there to that part of Alaska.
I mean, ice caves are a really special phenomenon, right? And we're lucky enough to be able to go into one kind of early summer because they usually shut down. But this scenario was just so unique, right? Being able to be in a situation where we had an ice cave that was really dark, right? The deeper you go, the darker it gets, right? And so you're almost thinking, every 10 feet I step back, I've got to bump it up another like 200, 300 ISO. And we were in the very back of this thing, probably like 300, 400 feet back, right? There's a waterfall in the middle. I've got my guides moving around. They're going across this like kind of technical little traverse. And that was so unique because I didn't have to tell anybody, hey, slow down. Hey, do that. Like, just pause right there. I could just let people move around freely. And in the past, that, shooting in ice caves or shooting in low light situations, you're shooting at like a second or a fifth of a second, depending on the amount of light in there. I mean, these are notoriously dark, right? But also notoriously beautiful. And what you find, to Mike's point, the dynamic range, right? Let's dive into that. What does that mean? It basically means the ability to kind of bring back that detail in the shadows and in the highlights. Talk about a harsh situation. Ice cave, you have sun coming in usually from one entrance, and the rest of it's dark or it's a saturated blue. So being able to bring back that detail, but also be able to have that contrast still play a part in the image was huge. I mean, this is a really special thing, right? Being able to kind of bring back some of that sun detail, some of that light hitting the water, but also have the colors, because we're trying to kind of reimagine and or recreate what we saw with our eye, and nothing will ever be as good as that. But in this situation, I mean, I had more visible light than I could see with my own eye. It was really special.
And so, Chris, you really did use the camera in this kind of hybrid way where you were shooting both stills, a lot of video, a lot of stills, doing that. Yeah. That's kind of how you just kind of go through life, yeah?
Yeah, and I mean, I think the key thing here is that I'm always looking for a camera that can do both and do both well. And I think that in some ways, you always feel like, oh man, I'm using this great camera, but I'm compromising the high ISO capability. It's not the camera for nighttime. like I really wanted to test this from a stills perspective first and foremost. Does it have the quality that I can print images that I just printed my first image with the camera to test it, to see, because that's a huge part of my business. I don't want to recommend a camera to somebody that, you know, that I'm going to say, well, the R4 is way, way better. No, this thing holds its weight. I mean, it is incredible. And I would say in many ways, the ability to have incredible video and put it in that mode and then shoot in extremely low light. For me, most of what I'm shooting is in harsh conditions. It's in dark, it's in storms, it's in places where I don't want to be inhibited by the quality of the camera. And that was truly kind of the situation here. And as I mentioned before, sorry, I know I'm blabbing, but the S2, it changed my career. I mean, it changed my life, truly. That camera allowed me to create images. I won an X Games gold medal with that photograph that I shot at ISO 30,000. I mean, it was only because of that technology and hopefully a little creativity from my end that allowed me to do that. And so this camera, I'm blown away. I'm like trying to reimagine what I can do. It's getting all the creative juices churning again.
You know, talking about kind of that hybrid way of shooting, this camera has a brand new sensor. Mike, can you speak to a little bit more detail about the new sensor in the camera?
Absolutely, yeah. So there's about that sensor. So it is a brand new sensor from the ground up. It's back illuminated, meaning that, believe it or not, a lot of the sensors that are out there in the world are now, the electronics and the wiring are on top of the photosensitive material. They're in between those pixels. So we just moved them underneath. So now not only do we have 12 megapixels, which gives us huge pixels, but we have even larger photo sites because those electronics are no longer in front, they're on the back. So the nerdy stuff aside, it gives us the ability to get the super high ISO performance, the over 15 stops dynamic range. But on top of that, we wanted this sensor, again, was purpose built for the best 4K image quality. It was purpose built to give you the best possible 4K you could possibly get, because we have full pixel readout in every single mode, from 30p, 24p, all the way up to 120p. There's no line skipping, no pixel binning. It's full pixel readout all the time. And there's no compromise. So there's no asterisks, so to speak, when you're talking about the 4K image quality on this camera. I don't know if I'm overstepping and getting into it early, but the autofocus of the sensor, the phase detection autofocusing system in this camera really separates itself from the a7S Mark II and brings us into a realm now of the autofocusing speed of the Alpha 9 Mark II or the A7R Mark IV. And like Chris, for you said, like in X Games now, you can not only shoot at 50,000, 100,000 ISO, but you're going to be able to have the subject tracking and the low light focusing like no camera's ever done before. So,
well, and it's not so much even that it's lightning fast. It's super fast, but it's smooth. And that's the thing, is it's a usable autofocus. That's the difference, right? Is I've seen cameras where it's like jumping back and forth, and I mean the subject detection on it is incredible. Like the contrast that it can isolate is amazing. I mean, I was really blown away with that, because we traditionally we're always kind of, okay, I'm going to shoot manual focus. I'm going to be safe here and just do it myself. But being able to rely on that autofocus was really amazing, especially in a situation where, again, you're already shooting in almost dark conditions. The camera's seeing more than your own eye, and it's focusing.
Yeah, and it goes to what you were saying before, where the hardware, it's no longer having to manipulate the hardware to get the shot that you want. You can actually let the hardware do its job, and then you can be more creative and more free to do what you want. Like you said, that freeing feeling is only capable because the hardware does its job and you don't have to worry about it. So
this is why that relationship, I think, within the Sony team is so great. I mean, to be honest and just to be totally transparent, like being able to give feedback to like the designers and the engineers and then see it come to life. I've never worked with any company that's done that, and that's really special, because you're seeing instant feedback like actually being applied, and what, like you said, Mike, it really frees you as a creative and allows you to kind of go out and be like, okay, now I can focus on my vision and not trying to understand this menu and trying to use hacks to kind of like, oh, I got to use this recorder or this thing to like get the most out of it. That's a really unique thing.
Yeah.
And Chris, we got a question on Facebook, not on Facebook, we got a question submitted to Alpha Universe for you, asking about how you use autofocus and whether you use it for both stills and video.
That's a great question. So typically for me, I'm a single shot autofocus guy when it comes to stills. Reason being, I mean, I love the continuous, I like all those things, but I'm usually like thinking of where my shot is, my subject is going to be pre-focusing, and then I'm just firing through that sequence or that experience, right? Mainly because I think that a lot of times if you're shooting continuous, you're shooting like a race car track, or the car's coming towards you, or wild animals. For me, I'm usually in kind of a slightly, I guess you could say, scenario where I kind of know what's going to happen. I'm kind of premeditating this action. So I really like that single shot. And then when it comes to video, oftentimes it depends on the shot, right? If it's a static shot and someone's moving through the scene, I'm just pre-focusing. But when we're moving around, say, for example, one of my favorite shots that we got, and I'm working on an edit right now from my trip, but we're kind of racking focus along this ice cave wall, and we're letting it happen with the autofocus, like picking our spot and moving. And I mean, you're talking really shallow depth of field, beautiful ice patterns kind of like coming forth in front of your eyes as you move back and forth. And I was really cool, because in the past you'd have to like, do this manually yourself, and now you're able to just like let the camera do its thing. That was really unique. So it oscillates, to answer the question. It really oscillates between both of them, depending on the situation and the time. But the point is that knowing that you can use both is crucial, right? Knowing that you can rely upon the autofocus is important. And I would say, to all the video people out there, like, autofocus is kind of like this taboo word. We don't really say it much, because people are like, oh yeah, whatever. Like, I'm not going to use that. Like, right. It's all about like, manually racking focus, but being able to have the option is really special, especially when you can barely see with your own eyes. And I truly mean that. Like, the camera sees way more than you can.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm glad you brought that up, because like you said, videographers, as soon as you say autofocus, they're like, whoa, autofocus. Like, but it's really true autofocus that you can use. And I know you didn't do a ton of portraiture in your video, but being able to have pupil autofocus while you're moving, while your subject's moving, and have it track the pupil of your eye at 1.8,
right,
is
and I've used
something
that
you just can't do. Yeah,
totally. And I've used that feature on other cameras, and it's so powerful too. Locking focus and then allowing you to kind of move with your subject is special.
It's ridiculous.
We got a question actually related to what you were just saying about external recorders, asking about the bit rate of the camera. And Mike, maybe you can answer this and clarify it a little bit. Sure. So talk to me about the bit rate and what it records internally and what you have to do externally.
Yep. So internally, the camera is 10-bit 422. The maximum is 10-bit 422, all eye, and that's in all shooting modes. That's from 4K 24 all the way up to 4K 120p and Full HD at 240 frames. So it's 10-bit 422 all the way through, and all eye available in all shooting modes. But the biggest thing with this camera, not the biggest thing, one of the huge things in this camera is that you can do 16-bit raw output at 4K 60p, which is almost never been done before. It's never been done before on a camera like this, that's for sure. So it's usually reserved for very high-end cinema cameras and production cameras. So to be able to do full 16-bit raw output at 4K 60p is massive. And again, to Chris's point before, to keep the size of the camera the same as what we've had before, with the heatsink, with 16-bit output, with all these features, is I sometimes am in awe of what the technicians and the engineers have been able to do.
Yeah. I mean, I keep coming back to that heat sink, because there's just an awful lot of technology, a lot of speed built into this. The new sensor, the new processor, all of it, and yet not to be overheating is really significant. I mean, that's without having to have a fan or anything else in the camera.
Yeah, that's why I've always said, like, I've probably gotten the question, where's the a7S Mark III every day for the last 5 years? And my answer's always been, we don't have the technology yet for it. Like, trust me, we're making the best product for you. We just literally couldn't invent the technology yet. And now we have, between the Bionz XR, between the new sensor, and you're welcome. So, yeah.
And it's funny, because it's like, people think, like, oh, why is this camera taking so long to come out? We're like, because they're perfecting it. And for me too, I've had people knocking on my door asking me, oh my gosh, when is this camera coming out? And I'm like, I'm waiting too, trust me. but Sony holds nothing back, and they want to put it out at the right time. And I've known about it for a couple months now. And I mean, getting it in my hands and testing it it exceeded my expectations.